All right, click the links for Odyssey BHG. Join channel. Remember, check me out. Subscribe, start Gab, Telegram, the various other links. So AfroHobbits, I don't know if this is 7 or 8. When you search it, DuckDuckGo, AfroHobbits, all my videos come up. But oddly enough, they don't come up on Google for some reason. So what happened? This AfroHobbit interview where she gives this long rambling explanation, basically explaining what cultural Marxism is and how it applies in this specific example to someone who's probably reading this interview and going like, what the hell is going on? What are we even doing anymore? Which is a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see how that pays off. First of all, let me call it now. This is going to bomb, which in real terms means Amazon won't get new subscriptions out of the show. So they invested, I don't know what, hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're not going to get a good return on investment. And I'm going to guess that this is going to be the worst return on investment for any Hollywood endeavor in history, because the initial investment is huge. I heard a rumor of $1 billion for this. I don't know about that. But it's at least hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't know how many shows they have planned out, like how many episodes they're filming and what the sets and things cost. But yeah, it's for sure hundreds of millions of dollars. It's going to be a huge, just a flat line for them. They're going to come out with this and they're expecting, oh, well, people are going to subscribe to the Amazon movie service, which I don't know if that's the Amazon Prime is the same thing. Like you get Amazon Prime and then you get the movie service or something like that. No, that's just not going to happen. You'll get some subs out of it. You're not going to get $500 million worth of subs out of it. There's no way in hell that this is going to be. They're going to look at the money invested in this and be like, yeah, we expected whatever percentage to come back from this, and licensing is going to pay out a certain amount over the next few years. It's like, oh yeah, none of that's going to happen. You mean we would have been better off taking $250 million and just like lighting it on fire? Yeah, it would have been. You would have saved money if you had literally just burned suitcases full of money, because this looks like what it is: Bolshevik cancer. So they're going to lose hundreds of millions of dollars on just this globalist brainwashing experiment that people are way sick and tired of it by now. It's 2022, right? So their only chance at this would have been pre-2015 Disney Star Wars, when they came out with that first movie with all the Rey and the Asian girl who was wearing the overalls, and then Finn and all that kind of nonsense. That was the point in Hollywood history that woke a lot of people up. We had commies call us istophobic for not liking a bait and switch movie because it was stupid, it was full of ugly people, and it was just pointless. Like none of it made it. Just doesn't look like Star Wars to me. Star Wars is 77 to 83 Star Wars, and maybe the prequels. But this looks like Disney. And the thing is, there was expectations with Disney. People thought, oh, Disney is going to knock it out of the park, because pre-2015. Disney had a pretty good record of, I think they had the Pirates of the Caribbean thing. So people look at that, Pirates of the Caribbean, like, you knocked that out of the park. That was, I think they made 3 movies that were just really solid, simple action adventure for a younger audience, but like everyone could watch it. And people saw that and go, okay, Disney is going to take Star Wars and they're going to bury those prequels. And then it came out and it was so freaking bad. And we looked at the George Lucas prequels. We're like, oh, okay, yeah, those weren't great, but they at least were trying to be Star Wars, even if they were kind of too much Return of the Jedi. And they should have been more, you should have made us a more Empire Strikes Back Star Wars. It should have been a more serious Star Wars. And really, like, I think that was because his wife was directing that or something. His first wife was directing Empire or something like that. It's like he's a big picture guy, but he's not so good at the fine details of the execution. You kind of want to let somebody else handle that. Anyway, so we look at that like, yeah, okay, that was at least Lucas's original vision. And then Disney come out and like, what the hef is this? This just looks like you went through a casting call. Like, we're going to make this diverse. My God, we made it diverse. Yeah, you really should have focused on making it good. Oh, are you saying diverse things can't be good? Yeah, probably. Oh, well, you're istophobic. Yeah, whatever. I don't give 2 shits about that. But I mean, you're not going to get people's money by yes, but I called you istophobic. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Everyone's istophobic, whatever. But you're not going to get butts in seats. And as you look at the Disney, it made billions of dollars. I think it made $2 billion, right? Keep in mind it cost quite a bit to make. It should have been huge. It should have been a cultural point in the timeline. Not like the original Star Wars, because you'd never come close to that, but it should have had toy sales and video game sales and all kinds of other tie-ins coming out of it, t-shirts and clothing lines and all kinds of stuff that came out of it. None of that stuff came out of it. Yeah, the movies made money, and then they did the Disney World had some kind of expo. It's like, yeah, that kind of underperformed. It's like, yeah, it made money, but it should have made billions more, and it didn't. Anyway, so when those three Disney trilogy came out, they all of a sudden you find the people you're expecting to get money from these people. All of a sudden you're called istophobic, not only just by some Twitter idiots, but by the people in the movies. Oh, you chased that girl off of Twitter. You're a public figure. You're making movies. You're gonna get feedback, good and bad. It's like you're not a flower that needs to be protected. You're a public figure who's making a lot of money. It's like you should have let all that stuff just roll right off you as you handle it with a smile and with grace and class, and so people will look at that and go like, oh, she can really handle herself. She's not some shrinking violet that needs to be protected and coddled. It's like we should hire her for more movies because she has a sense of humor about life. It's like, yeah, that didn't happen. And I don't know what happened to those people in Disney Star Wars. They're probably kind of done. It's like the Disney curse, unless you're Harrison Ford. Anyway, so you had a bunch of people calling us istophobic for not liking a bait and switch movie. You've used that term so often, you really have lost a lot of the sting. It's when you literally call everybody who disagrees with you a German of the 1930s. It's like people finally just go, okay, so what, whatever. But yeah, you've cried wolf so many times. The thing is, and that helped Solo Bomb, which wasn't a horrible movie, but it wasn't a Star Wars movie, mainly because they cast some guy who was a midget to play the role of Harrison Ford, who has a tall. He's a tall guy I think he was 6'2" in the original films. So he had that was a certain character. The character was somewhat imposing. It was hip, slick, and cool. It was what it was, this roguish James Bond character. And then you cast some guy who's short, and it just didn't, like, none of it worked. He's supposed to tower over his co-stars. Anyway, so Solo bombed. People were done with the Lando, Pando, robot love, emancipation, dong lover, soy child version of Star Wars. We can take some of Big Gay for nostalgia purposes, but like not full anal plus finishing on our face. We have to draw the line somewhere. We still have to maintain our dignity. The Disney trilogy was like the hand job level of the humiliation ritual. We decided it wasn't for us. We just, that's not how we roll. We had our little fling. We're like, it's just we're not gonna go back to this. But Disney just kept offering us just fresh wheelbarrows full of penis. No means no, Disney. And really, if being a German istophobe gets us better movies, I think most of us would be absolutely willing to sign up for that. Get us our Hugo Boss and our Mausers or our Lugers or something. So these useful idiots have no idea what they're talking about. One particularly developmentally disabled woman says his stories are about the different races doing their best when they leave the isolation of their own cultures and come together. Yeah, they team up to fight the orcs, but then they separate back into their own individual tribes. In fact, the end of the book of Return of the King, it differed from the movie a little bit. Go back and read like the last 30 pages of Return of the King, the book. And you see, it was a trip. Credit to Tolkien for putting that in the book. He says when you come back from war, essentially these parasites will foment discord while you're gone. I think he was referring to the communists, the Bolsheviks, and you got to clean them out. Cleansing fire. Clean them out of your villages. Clean them out of your civilization. You cannot tolerate Bolsheviks or globalists in your civilization, in your nation, because globalists destroy a nation. So to his credit, he put that in the end of Return of the King, which was that was a very mature point to a storytelling. But originally he was writing the lesson for his kids, and the books were a lesson. It's like that was That was a great point to put in the stories. Anyway, so at the end of the stories, they separated back into their tribes because when two groups mix, one group gets destroyed. How well did the open borders policy work out for the American Indians? You only maintain diversity when the groups don't mix. At the end of the story, the hobbits didn't invite the orcs into their village. Why would they? Orcs are bad. Their ways of life are way too different. She also talks about viewing the story in a modern lens. They come together to fight the common enemy, who is, of course, a blonde out of Aryan central casting. You know, it's weird, but Hollywood always makes the antagonist blonde or red hair, blue-eyed or green-eyed. Strange. Even if they have to dye the actor's hair like they did in Wonder Woman 1984, it was a Latin American guy with dark hair, dark eyes, but they dyed his hair to make him look more Austrian central casting. You know where I'm going with that. So her point is that a mixed group must defeat the evil blonde man. I mean, we're not fucking idiots. We know what's going on. So when I see that, I am, of course, rooting for the blonde man. I hope he genocides all of your motley crew and leaves the fields well fertilized. If you have AfroHobbits and EuroHobbits, first of all, GTFO with that cultural Marxism. Why would they mix in the first place? AfroHobbits are not in The Lord of the Rings. You're saying that the tribes live together, but they don't interbreed. They did that in the Stephen King movie version of the book The Gunslinger, which they took 7 books, which, don't get me wrong, were mostly fantastic. He did a pretty solid job with that. And they compressed it into one movie, but then they race swap everybody. Everyone now is... The Gunslinger, instead of being Clint Eastwood, is some non-Clint Eastwood type of character. And they go to some village where it's Asians and Africans and Europeans all mixed together. It's like... It's supposed to be an Old West setting for the first story of The Gunslinger. It was only in the 6th book of The Gunslinger where he does a self-insert, which, while he's still alive, I hope to God, go back and start editing that and edit out that self-insert in the 6th and 7th stories. That was just ridiculous. Anyway, so what's the point of them all living together? Over the generations, you would destroy the individual diversity to create some new mixed tribe without any history or culture. Why would the hobbits want to do that? Or did the groups just come together and start mixing, so this is year 1 of the Bolshevik diversity experiment, which was the same thing that happened in the Gunslinger. I guess they'd call it the start of the tragedies. You can only embrace your differences if you don't mix. They have different cultures. If they mix, they destroy both to create some new group without any roots to their ancestors. Why would anyone want to do that? You love your differences by maintaining the differences. Diversity only exists when you stay apart. This is just Frankfurt School 101 on how to destroy a nation. You use the media to brainwash the kids. The thing is, accelerationism, right? It was a right-wing kind of a meme. It turns out the left wing has been the real accelerationists all the time, mainly because they can't help themselves. It's the thing about the left wing is they have a lack of self-awareness, which is kind of their Achilles heel. I talk about that on Odyssey and BitChute. So, dear parasites, create your own news stories. And here's a thought. Instead of being a leech, write your own grand setting story. Create a fantasy world. There's a ton of history to draw from. Nobody is stopping you, and Tolkien is not stopping you. Lord of the Rings is not stopping you. It looks pathetic when all you can do is take someone else's story and try to corrupt it and say you improved it. I mean, and there's a meme about that too. You can't improve Tolkien. His story is complete because he's gone. You can ruin it, or you can just write a fresh story in some fantasy world of elves and goblins, if that's your thing. Which actually, now that I start thinking about it, is kind of silly because those are specifically European mythology, so it doesn't work when you've got non-Europeans. Which ultimately is why mixing up stories and tribes doesn't work. You can't have Europeans tell an African story. I always talk about Shaka Zulu because it's such a great story, or vice versa, because it's not their story to tell. It just ends up just being an abomination. Lord of the Rings is a European story based on English and broader European mythology and cultural traits of different countries. You could see them in the books. It's patently absurd to have non-European protagonists. It feels like cultural Bolshevik propaganda to subvert and destroy European mythology, which is exactly what it is. She talks about redress of balance in Hollywood or something. It's like, that has nothing to do with us. It has nothing to do with Tolkien. It's a European story. It's balanced and perfect as it is. To put non-Europeans in it destroys it. Lord of the Rings doesn't owe you anything, and the audience definitely doesn't owe you anything. The audience, the fans, were fans of Tolkien's story, his mythology, and they're curative. They're not transformative. It was Tolkien's creation, a fantasy based in his imagination. If Hollywood wasn't such parasites, they would simply tell their own stories, but they can't, because globalist stories don't work. At no time in history do groups who are so wildly different come together successfully. The truth is istophobic. The truth just really hurts, but you're better off sticking to the truth. Only nationalist and ethno-tribal stories work because they ring true with people. The European story is deep and vast, as are other people's stories. At least people who had... the thing is with this, it's kind of careful to say this, you got to have the ability to write and record. And if you don't have a written language, your stories are oral, and they're very limited. You can read stories and mythology of groups without writing, and the stories, there's only so many stories, and they all flow into each other, and they're very similar stories about the trickster coyote for American Indians. And there's really not that much diversity to the stories because they didn't have any way of writing them down and improving them. When you only have an oral tradition, it's really limited, and it sucks, but it is what it is. It's like this, there's no way to record those stories because they didn't invent writing. The thing is, mixing the stories destroys them. You can't fix the past of the movie industry by corrupting stories. You can only write fresh stories. But what is Tolkien's quote in the book? Evil can't create. It just corrupts and destroys. The shadow world of corruption of Mordor. Yeah, bingo. Mad TV 20 years ago, I think, did a parody of Lord of the Rings. It was like Rings in the Hood or something like that, and they were laughing at themselves and laughing at the whole stereotypes of different groups of people. It's like they had a sense of humor. 20 years ago, all kinds of different people had a legitimate sense of humor, laughing at themselves and also laughing at stereotypes and laughing at how people perceive them and what the perception. It's laughing, like, you could laugh at everything. And nowadays, that's all destroyed because of cultural Bolshevism. So I saw a picture of this on Gab, one of the pictures of the Lord of the Rings posters, and we couldn't tell if it was a parody or not, because that's how silly it looks. You got an AfroHobbit who's all of a sudden, like, this AfroHobbit's related to Frodo and Bilbo. Like, how exactly does that work? It doesn't work at all. Anyway, click the links. Join me on Subscribe if you're able to. Thanks for the recent donations. Very cool. And I will see you guys all on Telegram, Gab, and the various Odyssey, BitChute, other platforms.